Discipline was vital with so many men in such a confined space. On every ship kept in a red bag was the infamous cat o' nine tails. A lash of the rope was the brutal answer to every infringement of the ship's strict rules. Pirates weren't just treasure hunters, they were also sadistic, merciless, and incredibly violent lots. They didn't just raid ships. Their punishments for offenders were ruthless in the most barbaric ways imaginable, from feeding captives their own body parts to horrifying public displays and executions. They devised some of the most diabolical punishments just to maintain command of their vessels. What were some of these heinous practices? Join us as we reveal some of history's most brutal pirate punishments. Marooning. For pirates who broke the code in unforgivable ways, like stealing treasure or abandoning their mates, the punishment was brutal. Marooning. This meant being abandoned on a deserted island with no food, no fresh water, and little hope of survival. The condemned would usually get a bottle of rum, a pistol, and some gunpowder to slowly pass away or end things on their terms. This practice dates back to the 1700s, with its name possibly rooted in the Spanish word cimarron, which referred to runaway slaves or wild animals. In pirate slang, to be marooned was sarcastically called being made governor of an island. This punishment was almost always fatal, though a few managed to survive. One of the most famous cases was in 1720, when pirate Captain Edward England and his crew were left stranded on a barren island in the Indian Ocean. Defying the odds, they survived for 4 months by building a boat and sailing to Madagascar. Another survivor was Robert Jeffrey, a sailor marooned by the British Navy in 1807. He was rescued by an American ship, and the officer who abandoned him was dismissed from the Navy. However, the most famous marooning tale is that of Alexander Selkirk, a sailor abandoned on a remote island off Chile after arguing with his captain. Selkirk lived alone for 4 years before being rescued. Enduring weeks of isolation on a deserted island might seem like mercy compared to the next horror that awaits any unsubordinated soul who dares break the rules aboard the ship. Whipping with the cat o' nine tails. The cat o' nine tails, often simply called the cat, was a brutal whip with 9 knotted cords at the end. It's a typical cat o' nine tails, and there's a couple of other types. You could have a wooden handle or a rope handle. Sometimes the cords had fish hooks or musket balls attached to them to inflict even more pain. The whip would be stored in a sack, and when someone was to be flogged, it would be taken out, which led to the expression, to let the cat out of the bag. For pirates such as John Phillips, captain of the Revenge, breaking the rules could lead to severe punishment, usually 39 lashes, a number known as Moses' Law, believed to be the limit a person could survive. Some endured more, but many perished from far fewer. The cat often still bore the blood and guts from the last punishment, making it more likely that wounds would turn gangrenous and lead to the victim perishing. The cat o' nine tails was more than just a tool of punishment. It was a symbol of fear and control, striking terror into the hearts of both sailors and pirates. Naval historian Inam Roger described it as the voice of naval discipline, a language every seaman understood. Each cord of the cat o' nine tails was about 2 feet long and made from thin rope or rawhide. The name cat o' nine tails could refer to the 9 lives of a cat or to the scratch-like wounds it inflicted. First appearing in print in 1681, it had been used long before that during the Age of Sail, from the 16th to the 19th centuries. In the British Royal Navy, flogging was officially sanctioned in 1661 with the Articles of War, which allowed captains to order floggings for offences ranging from minor infractions like drunkenness to more serious crimes like theft or mutiny. The number of lashes administered could vary greatly depending on the offence and the captain's discretion. Commodore James Barron, for instance, ordered 500 lashes for a sailor named Robert Jeffrey in 1812, which he survived, though many did not. Infections and shock from blood loss were common. In one particular prison run by a governor who was known for his cruelty, it even meant 100 lashes from the cat o' nine tails whip, and passing away was not unusual. In 1731, a sailor named John Bow received 500 lashes for desertion, but passed away 3 days later from his wounds. The psychological impact of flogging was as severe as its physical toll. Admiral John Jarvis, Earl of St. Vincent, once noted that discipline is preserved in a ship by the dread of punishment. This fear was evident whenever a flogging was ordered. The crew was summoned to watch the cat, gathering to witness the punishment, which was often carried out in silence. The victim was tied to a mast or a grating, with the ship's surgeon standing by, though often as a formality rather than intervention. The use of brine to clean the wounds was standard practice, adding another layer of agony to the already excruciating experience. Jack Nasterface, a sailor who experienced flogging, wrote in his memoirs about the brutal aftermath. When cut down, he was taken to the sick bay, where the doctor dressed his wounds with pickles. Many days elapsed before he could perform his duty, and weeks before his shirt could dare to touch his back. Despite the brutality, not all captains favored flogging. Captain William Lee, known for his restraint following the mutiny on the Bounty, punished disobedience with 12 lashes. Similarly, Captain James Cook, during his 1770s voyages, preferred alternatives like confinement or reduced rations over flogging. Public opinion started turning against flogging in the 19th century, with Charles Dickens and Herman Melville among those who criticized the practice in their works. In the United States, flogging was limited to 12 lashes in 1850 and officially abolished in 1862. The British Royal Navy followed suit in 1879, though they still retained it as a punishment for mutiny until 1881. For some pirate captains, simply whipping disobedient crew members wasn't enough. They devised some of the most diabolical and inhuman methods to send their message across: torture. While most pirates focused on treasure, some captains took cruelty to new extremes, using brutal tactics to break the will of their captives. They believed that spreading fear through violence would make future victims surrender without resistance. These so-called pirate persuasions ranged from savage beatings and whippings to grotesque methods like tying a cord around a victim's head and tightening it until their eyes bulged. One favored method involved dunking prisoners into the sea from a ship's yardarm repeatedly until they confessed or begged for mercy. Some stories of pirate cruelty are shocking even by the standards of the time. One Portuguese captain who tossed his purse overboard had his lips sliced off and burned before his eyes. English pirate Charles Vane, infamous for his brutality, tortured captives with burning matches and left sailors battered, bloodied, or worse. Henry Every, another English pirate, captured the Mughal treasure ship Ganges Sawai in 1695. His crew subjected passengers to unimaginable horrors, assaulting them for gold before taking their lives and throwing them overboard. Similarly, Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts, despite his success as a pirate, was notorious for senseless cruelty. In one instance, he mutilated Dutch sailors, hanged others, and used their corpses for target practice. Among the most vicious was Edward Ned Lowe, whose name became synonymous with terror. In 1722, Lowe took the lives of Portuguese passengers, burned ships to the waterline, and forced prisoners to endure grotesque punishments. One was made to eat his ears, another his own heart. Off Brazil, another cruel pirate, Edmund Condent, was said to have boiled and eaten the heart of a captive who had dared to resist. Whenever this form of punishment was mentioned for both crew members or captured seafarers, what usually came to mind was the physical torment they had to endure. But for the next kind of punishment, the pirate played psychological games with their victims. walking the plank. One of the most infamous practices in pirate history. You didn't wash the dishes. They sentence you to walking the plank. Was making a captive walk the plank. This gruesome form of punishment involved a prisoner, hands bound with ropes and threatened at sword point, inching their way along a wooden plank balanced over the side of a ship. Danish pirate John Drake and the notorious New York River pirate Sadie the Goat were among those said to have used the plank as a tool of terror. But more commonly, pirates simply tossed offending crew members overboard without the dramatic ceremony. The origins of this cruel spectacle have been lost in time, but accounts of it stretch back to the Golden Age of Piracy in the 7th and 18th centuries. The term walking the plank didn't appear in print until the early 19th century, with one of the earliest mentions found in Francis Grosse's 1796 Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. One of the earliest recorded instances occurred in 1663 when Dutch sailor Jan Erasmus Reyning witnessed the pirate captain François L'Olonnais forcing several Spanish prisoners to walk the plank off the coast of Venezuela. L'Olonnais, infamous for his sadistic tendencies, laughed as he watched them plunge into the shark-infested waters below. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, was another pirate who used the plank as both punishment and a public spectacle. In 1720, off the coast of Newfoundland, Roberts captured the slave ship Samuel and made the crew walk the plank. William Snellgrave, the ship's captain, later described the event as a most horrid spectacle that haunted him for years. Roberts's pirate code of conduct included democratic elements like every man has a vote in affairs of moment, but also strict penalties for desertion or theft, punishable by marooning or by taking the culprit's life. In 1769, the crew of the British merchant ship Betsy staged their version of the plank by making the captain and 2 officers walk it rather than taking their lives outright. Remarkably, they survived by clinging to floating debris and were eventually rescued, a rare escape from a grim fate. The plank wasn't confined to the Caribbean and the Atlantic. In the South China Sea, the notorious pirate Ching Yisao, also known as Ching Shi, used the plank against rivals and uncooperative crew members. Operating in the early 19th century, Ching Shi commanded a fleet of over 300 ships and 20,000 to 40,000 pirates. Her strict code of conduct included punishments for assault on women and theft, but also allowed for extreme measures against enemies, maintaining a fearsome reputation. The last documented instance of walking the plank occurred in 1822, when the Spanish pirate Benito de Soto forced passengers and crew of the Morning Star to walk the plank off the coast of Ascension Island. This marked the end of an era, as the Golden Age of Piracy was fading and naval powers were becoming more effective at quashing pirate activity. While walking the plank was subsequently abolished, ship captains devised even more terrifying methods of punishment. Methods like the next one on our list. Keelhauling. This was one of the most dreaded punishments at sea, a brutal ordeal where a sailor would be tied at the feet and dragged underneath the ship's keel from one side to the other, often left a bloody mess with shredded clothes and skin. The sharp barnacles on the ship's hull made survival unlikely, and drowning was a frequent fate. This punishment, which originated in the Dutch Navy in the 17th century, was as much about instilling fear as it was about discipline. The term keelhauling comes from the Dutch word halen, meaning to haul under the keel. It wasn't just pirates who used this method. The Dutch, who were known for their naval might during the Golden Age, employed it to maintain strict order among their crew. One of the earliest instances was in 1622, when a Dutch sailor named Pilgrim Willem faced this grim fate for striking his captain. The process was merciless. The condemned sailor would be stripped and tied with ropes, sometimes with